Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Chapter 1. The Coffee Shop Collision. The morning rush at Sunrise Cafe was always chaos, but Ethan thrived in organized chaos. At 28, he'd learned to navigate crowded spaces with the same precision he used to design buildings. His calloused hands, earned from weekend hours in his woodworking shop, gripped his coffee cup and the rolled blueprints for the children's hospital wing he'd been working on for months. The project was his passion, creating spaces where sick children could heal, surrounded by beauty and hope. He was reviewing the playground specifications one more time, completely absorbed in his work, when fate decided to intervene in the most spectacular way possible. The collision happened in slow motion. One moment, Ethan was studying the blueprint spread across his usual corner table, and the next, a vision in a flowing lavender dress was tumbling toward him, arms windmilling as she fought to regain balance. Her lavender latte, matching her dress perfectly, he'd realized later, arced through the air in a graceful, devastating spiral. Oh no, oh no, oh no. The voice was musical, even in panic, carrying a warmth that immediately captured his attention. Coffee splashed across his blueprints with artistic precision, spreading like watercolor across months of careful planning. But Ethan barely registered the destruction because he was utterly captivated by the woman who'd caused it. She was stunning. Natural curls cascaded around her shoulders, catching morning sunlight through the cafe windows and creating an almost ethereal glow. Her skin held the rich warmth of golden honey, and her eyes, those incredible eyes, were the deepest brown he'd ever encountered, wide with mortification and glistening with unshed tears. Full lips parted in shock, and Ethan found himself wondering what they might taste like. When their gazes locked, electricity coursed through him, like lightning striking earth. The bustling cafe melted away, morning conversations becoming mere background noise. His heart thundered against his ribs as something fundamental shifted in his chest, like finding a missing piece he hadn't known was lost. "I am so sorry," she gasped, her hands hovering over the coffee-soaked blueprints. "Your work, I've completely ruined months of planning. I'm such a disaster. I can't believe I—" "Hey," Ethan said gently, standing up and reaching for napkins from the dispenser. "Accidents happen. Really, it's okay." She looked up at him then, really looked at him, and he watched her anxiety shift to something else entirely. Her eyes widened slightly as they took in his face. Kind brown eyes, strong jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. "It's not okay," she said, but her voice had softened. "This looks important, and I've made a complete mess of it." Ethan found himself smiling as he helped blot the coffee. "You know what? I've been staring at these plans for weeks, second-guessing every detail. Maybe this is exactly the push I needed to approach it differently." She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "You're really not angry?" "Why would I be angry?" Ethan asked, and he meant it. "Besides, now I have an excuse to talk to the person who just made my morning infinitely more interesting." The word beautiful lingered between them, and Ethan watched color bloom across her cheeks, making her even more radiant. She tucked a curl behind her ear, an unconsciously graceful gesture that made his breath catch. "I'm Sophia," she said, extending her hand. "Sophia Grace." "Ethan Carter," he replied, taking her hand in his writer's. The moment their skin touched, both of them felt it. A jolt of electricity that raced up their arms and settled somewhere deep in their chests. Her hand was small and soft in his larger, calloused one, but she didn't pull away immediately. Instead, they stood there for a heartbeat longer than necessary, both acutely aware of how perfectly their hands fit together. "Let me buy you a new coffee," Sophia said, finally pulling her hand back, though she immediately missed the warmth of his touch. "And maybe we can salvage some of your blueprints. I work at the Children's Hospital. I might be able to help." "You work at Children's Memorial?" Ethan's eyebrows shot up in surprise and delight. "I'm a pediatric nurse," she nodded, then gestured at the coffee-stained papers. "Is this the new wing design?" Ethan confirmed, and the smile that spread across Sophia's face was like watching the sun rise. "I've been working on it for 6 months. It's supposed to be a healing space for kids, somewhere beautiful and hopeful." "That's incredible," she breathed. leaning closer to study the blueprints despite the coffee stains. As she bent over the table, her perfume drifted up to him, something soft and floral that made him want to bury his face in her hair. I see so many scared children every day. A space like this could make such a difference. They worked together to salvage what they could of the blueprints, their heads bent close over the table. Every time Sophia brushed against him, every time their fingers touched as they separated sticky pages, Ethan felt that same electric jolt. He found himself studying her profile when she wasn't looking. The elegant curve of her neck, the way she bit her lip when concentrating. The little furrow that appeared between her eyebrows when she was thinking hard. "You know," Sophia said as they settled at a clean table with fresh coffee, "I think I can actually help with this. I see what works and what doesn't work for kids every day. The current playroom is so sterile and depressing." Ethan listened, transfixed, as she described what she'd learned from years of working with sick children. Her passion for her work shone through every word, and he found himself falling a little deeper with each insight she shared. She talked with her hands, gesturing expressively, and he was captivated by her grace, her intelligence, her obvious love for the children she cared for. "I chose nursing because of my little brother," she said, her voice growing softer. "He spent months in the hospital when he was 7, and I saw how much the environment affected his healing. Bright colors, natural light. Spaces that didn't feel clinical, they made such a difference." "Is he okay now?" Ethan asked gently. "Completely healthy," Sophia smiled, and Ethan felt his heart skip at the radiance of that smile. "He's 24 now and playing professional baseball. But those months taught me that healing isn't just about medicine, it's about hope." Ethan stared at her, completely smitten. "That's exactly what I'm trying to create. Hope." They talked for 2 hours, completely lost in each other. The cafe filled and emptied around them, but they barely noticed. Ethan learned that Sophia loved old movies and jazz music, that she made the world's best chocolate chip cookies according to her grandmother, and that she had a laugh that made his chest tight with want. Sophia discovered that Ethan built furniture in his spare time, that he'd chosen architecture because he believed in creating beauty, and that his smile made her stomach flutter like she was a teenager again. When Ethan absently pulled out a pen and began sketching on a napkin, Sophia watched in fascination. His hands moved with confidence and grace, and she found herself mesmerized by the way his fingers held the pen, the way his brow furrowed in concentration. "What are you drawing?" she asked softly. Ethan looked down at the napkin, then back at her, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "You," he admitted. "I'm sorry, I didn't even realize I was doing it. You have the most beautiful profile." Sophia felt her breath catch as she looked at the sketch. He'd captured her perfectly, the curve of her cheek, the way her curls fell over her shoulder, even the small smile that played at the corners of her mouth when she was thinking. But more than that, he'd somehow captured something in her expression that she'd never seen before. A softness, a happiness that made her look luminous. "No one's ever drawn me before," she whispered. "I can't imagine why not," Ethan replied, his voice rough with sincerity. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw, and so genuine that Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. She looked into his gentle brown eyes and saw something that made her heart race. Not just attraction, though that was certainly there, but something deeper: interest, respect, the beginning of something that could be extraordinary. "I should go," she said reluctantly, glancing at her watch. "My shift starts in an hour." "Of course," Ethan said, though disappointment flickered across his features. He stood when she did, and they walked slowly toward the door, neither wanting this magical morning to end. "Ethan," Sophia said as they reached the entrance, turning to face him. The morning sun caught in her hair again, and Ethan had to clench his hands to keep from reaching out to touch those silky curls. "Yes?" "Thank you," she said softly, "for not being angry about the coffee, for making this morning wonderful instead of terrible." "Thank you," he replied, stepping closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, for literally bumping into my life. They stood there for a moment, caught in each other's gravity, both feeling the pull of something powerful and new. Then Sophia rose up on her tiptoes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek, her lips lingering just a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Maybe I'll see you around," she whispered against his skin, her breath warm and sweet. And then she was walking away, her lavender dress flowing around her legs, leaving Ethan standing in the doorway of Sunrise Cafe, with his heart pounding and the lingering scent of her perfume in the air. He touched his cheek where her lips had been and smiled. He was definitely going to see her around. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Return. 3 days felt like 3 months. Ethan had never been the type of man to obsess over a woman, but Sophia had turned his carefully ordered world completely upside down. He'd found himself checking his phone constantly, hoping for a text that never came. He'd walked past Sunrise Cafe twice during his lunch breaks, telling himself he just wanted good coffee, while secretly scanning the crowd for a glimpse of dark curls and a radiant smile. He'd even started sketching her face from memory during boring client meetings, filling the margins of his notebooks with the curve of her smile, the tilt of her head, the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed. His colleagues had started giving him strange looks, but Ethan didn't care. He couldn't get her out of his head. It was Thursday afternoon when his secretary, Mrs. Lynn, knocked on his office door with an expression of barely contained amusement. "Mr. Carter," she said, her eyes twinkling, "there's someone here to see you." Ethan looked up from his computer screen, where he'd been staring at the same email for 20 minutes without reading a single word. "Do I have an appointment I forgot about?" "No, Mrs. Lynn replied, stepping aside, "but I think you'll want to see this visitor." And then Sophia stepped into his office doorway, and Ethan's heart nearly stopped. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. Today, she wore a soft yellow sundress that made her skin glow, and her curls were pulled back in a loose bun, with a few tendrils framing her face. She carried a small bakery box and had his leather notebook clutched against her chest. "Hi," she said softly, and just the sound of her voice made Ethan's pulse race. "Hey," he managed, standing up so quickly that his chair rolled backward and hit the window with a soft thud. "Sophia, how did you?" "You forgot this," she said, holding up his notebook. "It was under our table at the cafe. I would have brought it sooner, but I had to work a double shift, and then I had to work up the courage to actually come here." Ethan stared at her, completely smitten. She'd come to his office. She'd tracked him down, found where he worked, and come to see him. "You didn't have to track me down," Ethan said, though he was clearly pleased she had. "You could have just dropped it off with reception." "I could have," Sophia agreed, then hesitated. "But I also wanted to apologize properly and maybe see if those blueprints were salvageable." She held out the bakery box. "Peace offering." When Ethan opened it, the scent of chocolate chip cookies filled his office. "You made these?" "Guilty as charged," she said. "I stress bake. It's either cookies or a very messy kitchen, so I figured cookies were the safer option." Ethan took a bite, and his eyes widened genuinely. "These are incredible." "Don't sound so surprised," Sophia laughed. "I do have some skills beyond destroying people's work." Behind them, Mrs. Lynn cleared her throat. "Should I reschedule your 3 o'clock?" she asked with obvious amusement. Ethan looked at his watch, surprised to see it was already 2:30. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Reschedule everything for the rest of the day." Mrs. Lynn's smile widened. "Of course, Mr. Carter." "Should I close your door?" "Leave it open," Ethan said quickly, not because he didn't trust himself around Sophia, but because he didn't want her to feel trapped or uncomfortable, though the way she was looking at him like he was something wonderful, she couldn't quite believe was real suggested. She wasn't uncomfortable at all. "These are incredible," Ethan said after taking another bite of cookie. "Your grandmother wasn't lying." "Nana Ruby never lies about important things," Sophia laughed, and the sound made something warm and bright unfurl in Ethan's chest. Food and love are the 2 most important things in the world, according to her. "Smart woman," Ethan said, taking another bite and noticing how Sophia's eyes followed the movement of his mouth. The awareness between them was electric, crackling in the air like a live wire. "Would you like to see the rest of the building?" Ethan heard himself asking. "I could show you the children's hospital project, the parts that weren't destroyed by lavender lattes." Sophia's face lit up. "I would love that." Ethan grabbed the salvaged blueprints and led her through the office, acutely aware of her presence beside him. She smelled like vanilla and something floral, and every time she leaned close to look at something, his pulse spiked. His colleagues stared openly as they passed. Ethan Carter, who never brought personal visitors to the office, was giving a personal tour to a stunning woman who made him smile like he'd won the lottery. In the conference room, Ethan spread the blueprints across the large table and watched Sophia study them with professional interest. She leaned over the plans, and he found himself standing close behind her, close enough to see the delicate curve of her neck, close enough to catch that intoxicating scent that was purely her. "This is brilliant," she said, tracing the outline of the play area with her finger. "The way you've incorporated natural light here and the reading nooks, Ethan, this is going to change everything for those kids." Her praise made him feel 10 feet tall. "You really think so?" "I know so," she said, turning to face him. They were standing very close now. Close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Close enough to count her eyelashes. "I see these kids every day. They're scared and hurting, and so brave it breaks your heart. This space is going to give them hope. That's all I want," Ethan said softly, "to give them something beautiful to focus on instead of their fear." Sophia's eyes softened, and she reached out to touch his arm. The contact sent electricity shooting through him, and he saw her eyes widen slightly, as if she'd felt it too. "You're a good man, Ethan Carter," she said quietly. "You barely know me," he replied, but he didn't step away from her touch. "I know enough," she said. "I know you spend your free time building furniture for people. I know you put your heart into designing spaces for sick children. I know you weren't angry when a clumsy stranger ruined your work. I know you draw beautiful things on napkins and make me feel like the most interesting person in the world when you listen to me talk." Ethan's breath caught. "Sophia, would you like to have lunch with me?" she asked, and he could hear the slight nervousness in her voice that told him this was as new for her as it was for him. "I know it's short notice, but I have the afternoon off, and I thought maybe—" "Yes," Ethan said immediately. "Yes, absolutely, yes." Her smile was radiant. "There's a little deli around the corner that makes amazing sandwiches." They gathered up the blueprints and headed for the elevator, Ethan's hand settling naturally on the small of her back as they walked. The contact was innocent but intimate, and he felt Sophia's slight intake of breath at his touch. In the elevator, they stood closer than necessary, stealing glances at each other. When their eyes met, the attraction between them was so obvious that Ethan was amazed. The other passengers couldn't feel it crackling in the air. "I'm really glad you came," Ethan said as they walked to the deli, his hand brushing against hers as they moved. "I almost didn't," Sophia admitted. "I sat in my car outside your building for 10 minutes, trying to work up the courage." "Why?" he asked, stopping to face her on the sidewalk. Sophia looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "Because you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who wouldn't affect me this much," she said honestly, and the vulnerability in her voice made his chest tight. "Someone I could forget about after a nice conversation and a coffee spill. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, Ethan, about your smile and your laugh, and the way you looked at me like I was something precious." Ethan felt his heart pound. "You haven't been able to stop thinking about me?" "Not for a second," she whispered. They stood there on the busy sidewalk, people flowing around them like water around stones, completely absorbed in each other. Ethan reached out and tucked a curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I've been sketching you from memory," he admitted. "I've walked past that cafe every day, hoping to see you. I've been completely useless at work because all I can think about is the way you laugh and how it felt when you kissed my cheek." Sophia's cheeks flushed pink. "Really?" "Really," he confirmed, his thumb tracing along her jawline. "You've turned my whole world upside down, Sophia Grace." She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for just a moment. "Good," she said softly, "because you've done the same to mine." At the deli, they discovered a quiet corner table and talked for hours. Ethan learned that Sophia had grown up in Chicago, had dreamed of nursing since childhood, made terrible coffee but extraordinary cookies, and possessed the most infectious laugh he'd ever heard. Sophia discovered that Ethan had crafted most of his apartment furniture by hand, had never married because he'd never found someone who made him want forever, and had a way of looking at her that made her feel like the most captivating woman alive. "I should probably leave," Sophia said, reluctantly, as afternoon shadows lengthened through the deli windows. "I promised Nana Ruby I'd have dinner with her tonight." "Of course," Ethan replied, disappointment flickering across his features. Would you like to do this again? Maybe somewhere nicer next time. Sophia's smile could have powered the entire city. I'd love to, but not anywhere too fancy. I enjoy talking with you, Ethan. I like discovering who you are. I don't need expensive restaurants for that. Saturday? He asked hopefully. There's a farmer's market down by the lake. We could walk around, maybe grab some lunch. That sounds perfect, she said. And when she stood up, Ethan stood too, not wanting this afternoon to end. Outside the deli, they lingered on the sidewalk, neither wanting to say goodbye. Sophia, Ethan said softly. Yes? Thank you for bringing my notebook back, for the cookies, for lunch. For making this the best day I've had in years. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes again. Thank you for being worth the 10 minutes of courage it took to walk into your office. And then, rising up on her tiptoes just like she had at the cafe, she pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. But this time, her lips lingered longer, and when she pulled back, her eyes met his with an intensity that made his breath catch. Saturday, she whispered. Saturday, he confirmed. And as Ethan watched her walk away, her yellow dress swaying with each step, he knew with absolute certainty that Sophia was going to change his life forever. Chapter 3. Saturday Sunshine. Saturday morning dawned bright and cloudless, the kind of perfect Chicago day that made the city look like a postcard. Ethan had been awake since 5:30, too excited and nervous to sleep. He changed his shirt 3 times, settled on dark jeans and a navy Henley that his sister always said brought out his eyes. Then changed again before going back to the original choice. By the time he arrived at the lakefront farmer's market, his palms were sweating, and his heart was racing like he was 16 again. He checked his watch, 9:58 a.m. They'd agreed to meet at 10 o'clock by the entrance, and Ethan had arrived 15 minutes early because the thought of Sophia standing there, waiting for him, thinking he'd stood her up, was unbearable. And then he saw her. Sophia emerged from the crowd like something out of a dream, wearing a flowing white sundress with tiny blue flowers scattered across the fabric. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, catching the morning sun, and creating a halo effect that made her look absolutely ethereal. She had a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder and wore sandals that made soft clicking sounds on the pavement as she walked. When their eyes met across the bustling market entrance, Ethan felt that same electric jolt he'd experienced in the coffee shop. Her face lit up with the most radiant smile, and she raised her hand in a small wave that made his chest tight with affection. "Hi," she said breathlessly as she reached him. And Ethan wondered if she'd been nervous too, or if she'd hurried to get here. "Hi yourself," he replied, unable to stop grinning. "You look beautiful." The compliment made her cheeks flush pink, and she tucked a curl behind her ear in that gesture he was already learning to love. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Mr. Carter." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, both a little amazed that this was real, that they were here together on this perfect morning. "So," Ethan said, offering her his arm, ready to explore. "Lead the way," Sophia replied, slipping her hand through his arm. The contact sent warmth shooting through both of them, and Ethan had to resist the urge to pull her closer. The farmer's market was a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds and smells. Vendors called out their wares. Children ran between the stalls with ice cream sticky fingers, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh bread, ripe fruit, and blooming flowers. Ethan found himself completely enchanted, not by the market itself, but by watching Sophia experience it. She moved through the crowd with natural grace, stopping to admire displays of heirloom tomatoes, chatting easily with vendors about their produce, and cooing over babies in strollers with genuine delight. At a flower stand, she buried her face in a bouquet of peonies and closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. "They smell like my grandmother's garden," she said, opening her eyes to find Ethan, watching her with an expression so tender it made her breath catch. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing," he said softly. You see beauty in everything, don't you?" The observation made her heart flutter. "Don't you?" "I'm learning to," Ethan replied, his eyes never leaving her face. "You're teaching me." At a produce stand run by an elderly Italian couple, Sophia spent 20 minutes discussing the best ways to prepare eggplant, while Ethan listened, fascinated by her animation, the way she gestured with her hands, the musical quality of her laughter. When the vendor's wife slipped an extra tomato into Sophia's bag with a wink, Ethan understood completely. Sophia had that effect on people. She made them want to give her things, to make her smile. "You're buying ingredients," Ethan observed as Sophia carefully selected peaches and fresh basil. "Are you cooking for someone special?" "My grandmother," Sophia replied, then shot him a sideways glance. "Unless you'd like to be someone special." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. And Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "I'd like that very much." "Good," Sophia said, her smile turning slightly mischievous, "because Nana Ruby has been dying to meet you ever since. I told her about the mysterious architect who wasn't angry about coffee-stained blueprints." "You told your grandmother about me?" Ethan asked, surprised and pleased. "I tell Nana Ruby everything," Sophia admitted. "She's my best friend and my biggest supporter and the wisest person I know. Fair warning, though, she's going to grill you like a suspicious parent and probably embarrass me with baby stories." "I can handle suspicious grandmothers," Ethan said confidently. "And I'd love to hear baby stories about you." As they continued through the market, their conversation flowed as easily as it had in the coffee shop and at lunch. Ethan learned that Sophia had been raised by her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12, that Nana Ruby had worked 3 jobs to put her through nursing school, and that family meant everything to her. Sophia discovered that Ethan had grown up in a house where his father worked constantly and his mother filled the silence with books and art, that he'd learned to build things with his hands because creating something beautiful felt like making the world a little better. At a honey stand, the vendor offered them samples on small wooden spoons. When Sophia tasted the wildflower honey, her eyes closed in bliss, and she made a small sound of pleasure that went straight to Ethan's core. "That's incredible," she murmured, opening her eyes to find Ethan staring at her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "You have a little," Ethan said softly, reaching out to brush his thumb across the corner of her mouth where a drop of honey lingered. The touch was gentle, innocent, but the moment his skin made contact with her lips, the air between them seemed to crackle with electricity. Sophia's breath caught, and she found herself leaning into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for just a moment. "There," Ethan whispered. But he didn't pull his hand away immediately. Instead, his thumb traced along her lower lip, and Sophia's eyes opened to meet his, dark with something that made her pulse race. "Thank you," she breathed, and they stood there for a heartbeat longer than necessary, both acutely aware of how close they were, how much they wanted to be closer. The honey vendor cleared his throat, and they sprang apart, both flushing with embarrassment and something deeper. "We'll take a jar of the wildflower," Ethan said quickly, pulling out his wallet. "My treat," Sophia protested, but Ethan was already handing over money. "Next time," he said, and the promise of a next time made her smile. By 11:30, Sophia's tote bag was full of ingredients for what she promised would be the best lunch Ethan had ever eaten. They made their way toward the lake, where Nana Ruby's house sat in a tree-lined neighborhood that had been her home for 40 years. "This is my grandmother's house," Sophia said as they approached the yellow cottage. "Fair warning, she's going to interrogate you and probably embarrass me with childhood stories." "I can handle grandmotherly interrogation," Ethan said with a grin. Before they reached the porch, the front door opened, and Nana Ruby appeared, a petite woman with silver hair and Sophia's exact smile. "You must be Ethan," she said, looking him up and down with sharp eyes. "I'm Ruby Thompson, and I hope you're hungry because this granddaughter of mine cooks like she's feeding half the neighborhood." "Nana," Sophia protested, her cheeks flushing. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Thompson," Ethan said respectfully. "Thank you for letting me join you for lunch." "Well, you seem polite enough," Nana Ruby said with approval. "Come on in, both of you, and Ethan. I hope you don't mind family stories because I've got plenty." The inside of the house was warm and welcoming, filled with family photos and handmade quilts, and the smell of something delicious baking in the oven. Ethan found himself immediately at ease, charmed by the obvious love that filled every corner. "Sophia tells me you're an architect," Nana Ruby said as they settled in the cozy living room. "What kind of buildings do you design?" "Right now, I'm working on a children's hospital wing," Ethan replied. "I want to create spaces that help people heal." "Healing spaces," Nana Ruby mused. "I like that." This old house has been a healing space for our family for 4 decades. When Sophia came to live with me, she was so broken, so scared. But love and time and a safe place to call home, that's what heals a heart. Ethan glanced at Sophia, who was looking down at her hands, and he felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. The idea of her as a scared 12-year-old, grieving her parents, made his chest ache. "Your granddaughter is pretty special," he said softly. "The way she talks about her work, about the children she cares for, she has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met." "She gets that from her mother," Nana Ruby said with obvious pride. "And her stubborn streak from me. Fair warning, we Thompson women love hard and fight hard and don't give up easy. We wouldn't expect anything less," Ethan replied, meeting Sophia's eyes with a smile that made her heart skip. In the kitchen, Ethan watched Sophia work with easy efficiency, turning the market ingredients into something that smelled like heaven. When she reached up to get plates from a high cabinet, he moved naturally behind her, his chest brushing against her back as he reached over her head. "I've got it," he said softly, his voice rough from their proximity. Sophia turned in the circle of his arms, suddenly finding herself trapped between Ethan and the counter. They were close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Thank you," she whispered. And for a moment, they just looked at each other, the air thick with possibility. "Sophia Grace Thompson." Nana Ruby's voice called from the living room. "If you don't stop flirting in my kitchen and bring that man his lunch, I'm going to come in there and embarrass you both." They sprang apart, laughing breathlessly, both flustered by the intensity of the moment. Lunch was perfect. Fresh pasta with tomatoes and basil, crusty bread, and peach cobbler that made Ethan groan with pleasure. But even better than the food was the conversation. The way Nana, Ruby, and Sophia finished each other's sentences, the stories about Sophia's childhood that made Ethan fall a little deeper with every laugh. "She was always bringing home strays," Nana Ruby said, showing Ethan a photo of 10-year-old Sophia holding a bedraggled kitten. Dogs, cats, birds with broken wings, and once, a baby raccoon that had fallen out of its nest. "Nana," Sophia protested, but she was laughing. "What happened to them all?" Ethan asked. "She found homes for everyone," Nana Ruby said proudly. "That's my granddaughter. She sees something hurting, and she can't help but try to fix it." After lunch, Ethan noticed Nana Ruby struggling with the squeaky front step and automatically knelt down to examine it. "Just needs a little oil," he said, looking up at her. "Do you have any WD-40? 20 minutes later, he'd fixed the step and tightened the loose railing, refusing Nana Ruby's offers of payment with a smile. "You keep that one," Nana Ruby whispered to Sophia as Ethan washed his hands. "He's a keeper." As the afternoon wound down, Ethan and Sophia found themselves on the front porch swing, watching the sun begin its descent toward evening. Nana Ruby had retreated inside for her afternoon nap, leaving them alone with the soft sound of wind chimes and the distant laughter of children playing in the neighborhood. "This was perfect," Ethan said softly, his arm stretched along the back of the swing behind Sophia. "It was, wasn't it?" she agreed, unconsciously leaning closer to him. "Nana Ruby likes you. That's not easy to achieve." "I like her too," Ethan said. "I can see where you get your strength." They talked quietly as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, sharing stories about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. When Sophia mentioned that she'd always wanted to travel but had never left the Midwest, Ethan found himself mentally planning trips they could take together, places he wanted to show her. "I should probably head home," Ethan said reluctantly as the streetlights began to flicker on. "But I don't want this day to end." "Neither do I," Sophia admitted. They walked slowly through her childhood neighborhood, Sophia pointing out houses where friends had lived, the corner where she'd fallen off her bike and scraped her knee, the park where she'd spent countless summer afternoons. Every story made Ethan fall a little deeper, painted a picture of the girl who'd grown into this incredible woman. "That's my tree," Sophia said, stopping in front of a massive oak tree in the center of the small park. "I used to climb up to that branch there and read for hours. It's where I decided I wanted to be a nurse." "It's beautiful," Ethan said, but he was looking at her, not the tree. "I used to make wishes under this tree," Sophia said softly, placing her hand on the rough bark. "Silly childhood wishes, mostly, but some of them came true." "What did you wish for?" Ethan asked, stepping closer. "Love," she said simply, turning to face him. "Real love. The kind that lasts forever and makes you brave and turns ordinary moments into magic." Ethan's heart pounded as he looked into her eyes, seeing his own feelings reflected back at him. "And do you think maybe," she whispered. And then she was in his arms, and he was cupping her face in his hands, and they were kissing under the old oak tree as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The kiss was soft and sweet and perfect, full of promise and hope and the beginning of something beautiful. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you, Sophia Grace," he whispered against her lips. "Good," she breathed, her hands fisted in his shirt, "because I'm falling for you too, Ethan Carter." As they walked back to her grandmother's house, hand in hand, both of them knew that this perfect Saturday had changed everything. They were no longer strangers who'd met by chance. They were two people who'd found something rare and precious and worth fighting for. And under the old oak tree, where a little girl had once wished for true love, that love had finally found its way home. Chapter 4. Building Something Beautiful. 2 months of dating had revealed something Ethan hadn't expected. Sophia was even more perfect than he'd imagined. Not perfect in the flawless, untouchable way that made a person feel inadequate, but perfect in the way that puzzle pieces were perfect when they found their match, in the way that harmonies were perfect when voices blended into something more beautiful than either could create alone. She was funny and smart and passionate about her work. She made terrible coffee, but incredible cookies. She cried during sad movies and laughed at his terrible jokes, and had opinions about everything from architecture to baseball to the best way to make grilled cheese sandwiches. She was real and warm and wonderful, and Ethan was completely, utterly, hopelessly in love. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm over the past 8 weeks. Dinners at little restaurants where they talked for hours, long walks along the lakefront where they held hands and shared stories, movie nights at his apartment where they curled up on his couch, and she fell asleep against his chest while he played with her hair and wondered how he'd gotten so lucky. But today was different. Today, Ethan was going to share something with her that he'd never shared with anyone, his workshop. "You sure you want to see this?" he asked as they pulled up to the converted garage he rented in an industrial part of the city. "It's not much to look at from the outside." "Are you kidding?" Sophia said, practically bouncing with excitement. "I've been dying to see where you create all that beautiful furniture. Plus, you said you're building something for the children's hospital. I want to help." Ethan's heart swelled with affection. Of course she wanted to help. Sophia saw a project that would benefit sick children, and her immediate instinct was to pitch in. It was one of the thousands of things he loved about her. The workshop was Ethan's sanctuary, a place where he came to think and create and lose himself in the satisfaction of building something beautiful with his hands. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the skylights, illuminating workbenches covered with hand tools, wood shavings scattered across the concrete floor, and the project that had been consuming his weekends for the past month. "Oh my God," Sophia breathed, moving toward the center of the space, where a half-finished playground structure stood like a wooden sculpture. "Ethan, this is incredible." The playground was designed specifically for the children's hospital, scaled for kids of different ages and abilities, with rounded edges and non-toxic finishes and little details that would delight young imaginations. There were tunnels to crawl through, platforms at different heights connected by ramps and bridges, and spaces that would eventually hold activities and games. "It's not finished yet," Ethan said, suddenly nervous about her reaction. "I still need to sand everything smooth. Add the activity panels." "It's perfect," Sophia interrupted, running her hands along the smooth wood with obvious reverence. "The kids are going to love this. Look at this little alcove here. It's like a secret hideaway. And these curves, Ethan, how did you even figure out how to build something like this?" "Lots of planning," he admitted, moving to stand beside her, "and about 15 different attempts at getting the angles right. I kept thinking about what you told me that first day, about how healing isn't just about medicine. It's about hope. I wanted to build something that would give them joy." Sophia turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You did. You absolutely did." The emotion in her voice made his chest tight, and he had to resist the urge to pull her into his arms and kiss her until they both forgot everything else. Instead, he cleared his throat and reached for a piece of sandpaper. Want to help me make it even better? He asked, holding up the sandpaper. For the next 3 hours, they worked together comfortably. Ethan showed Sophia how to sand with the grain, his hands guiding hers when she needed direction. The physical closeness sent awareness coursing through both of them. And more than once, they found themselves standing closer than necessary. Like this? Sophia asked, concentrating on smoothing a curved railing. Exactly right, Ethan said, watching her careful movements. You're getting the hang of it. I like making things, she said, glancing up with a smile that made his chest tight. There's something satisfying about improving something with your own hands. When their eyes met, both felt the pull of attraction, but they returned to work, letting the comfortable rhythm of shared effort speak for them. We should probably take a break, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Good idea, Sophia agreed breathlessly. They shared a lunch of sandwiches and cold beer, sitting on upturned crates in the afternoon sunlight. Sophia told him about her morning shift, about a little boy who'd drawn her a picture of his family that included her as his angel nurse. And Ethan fell a little deeper, listening to the love in her voice when she talked about her patients. What about you? She asked. How's the hospital project coming along? Better, thanks to you, Ethan said honestly. I incorporated all your suggestions about the play spaces and the quiet areas. The hospital administration loves the design. I'm so proud of you, Sophia said softly, and the words hit him like a physical blow. He'd never had someone be proud of him before, not like this, not with such genuine admiration and love. Sophia, he started, but she was already moving, already sliding off her crate and coming toward him with an expression that made his heart race. Yes, she whispered, stopping just inches away from where he sat. He began, then lost his train of thought entirely as she reached out and brushed a piece of sawdust from his hair. Her touch was gentle, tender, and he found himself leaning into it like a man starved for affection. I love watching you work, she said quietly. Your hands are so strong and sure. You create beautiful things, Ethan, not just buildings and furniture, but moments, feelings. You make people feel safe and valued and important. You do that too, he replied, standing up so they were face to face. Every day, with every patient you care for, every person you smile at, you make the world brighter just by being in it. They were standing so close now that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could feel the warmth of her breath against his skin. His hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs tracing the elegant lines of her cheekbones. I'm crazy about you, he whispered. Good, she breathed, rising up on her tiptoes to close the distance between them. Because I'm crazy about you too. Their kiss was deeper than any they'd shared before, hungrier, full of 2 months of growing attraction, and the kind of passion that made the rest of the world fade away. Ethan's hands tangled in her hair while Sophia's fisted in his shirt, both of them desperate to be closer, to feel more. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. We should probably, he started. Finish the sanding, Sophia completed, though neither of them moved. Right, Ethan agreed. The playground, she repeated. They stared at each other for another long moment, both fighting the urge to forget about everything else and get lost in each other. Then a piece of wood crashed to the floor, startling them apart and making them both laugh breathlessly. Back to work? Ethan asked. Back to work, Sophia agreed. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of stolen glances and careful touches, their awareness of each other making every interaction charged with electricity. By the time they finished for the day, the playground was noticeably smoother and more beautiful. But more importantly, Ethan and Sophia had discovered something new about their relationship. They worked well together, complemented each other, created something better when they combined their efforts. Dinner? Ethan asked as they cleaned up. I'd love to, Sophia replied, but I should probably shower first. I'm covered in sawdust. You could shower at my place, Ethan offered, then quickly added. I mean, if you want. No pressure. I just a thought. You know what? Never mind. That was. Ethan, Sophia interrupted with a soft smile. I'd love to shower at your place. An hour later, they were sitting in Ethan's kitchen, sharing takeout Chinese food and talking about everything and nothing. Sophia had borrowed one of his shirts, a soft blue button-down that hit her mid-thigh and made her look impossibly beautiful. and Ethan was having trouble concentrating on the conversation because all he could think about was how right she looked in his clothes, in his space, in his life. "So, what's next weekend look like for you?" he asked, twirling lo mein around his chopsticks. "Well," Sophia said thoughtfully, "my best friend Olivia is having a barbecue on Saturday. She's been dying to meet you properly. Fair warning, she's very protective and will probably interrogate you about your intentions." "I can handle protective best friends," Ethan said confidently. "What about you? Ready to meet my parents?" Sophia's eyes widened. "Your parents?" "Sunday dinner," Ethan explained. "It's a tradition. My mom cooks enough food for an army. My dad actually emerges from his office, and we all pretend we're a normal family for 2 hours." "They've been asking about you?" "They've been asking about me?" Sophia's voice was slightly higher than usual. "My mother thinks you must be some kind of saint to put up with me," Ethan said with a grin. "And my father, well, let's just say he's never seen me this happy before." "Happy?" Sophia asked softly. "Ridiculously, embarrassingly happy," Ethan confirmed. "The kind of happy that makes my coworkers give me strange looks when I smile at my computer for no reason. The kind of happy that makes me wake up every morning excited about the day because I might get to see you." Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes. "You make me happy too," she whispered. "Happier than I've ever been." Later, they slow danced in his living room to music playing softly from his phone. Sophia's head rested against Ethan's chest, and she could hear the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, feel the warmth of his hands as they moved slowly up and down her back. "This is nice," she murmured against his shirt. "Nice doesn't begin to cover it," Ethan replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "This is perfect." "You're perfect." "I'm not perfect," Sophia protested. "You are to me," Ethan said softly. "Absolutely perfect." When it came time for her to leave, they stood by his front door for 20 minutes, neither wanting to say goodbye. Ethan's hands were warm on her waist, and Sophia's were resting on his chest, right over his heart. "Thank you for today," she said quietly. "For sharing your workshop with me, for letting me help with the playground, for making me feel like I'm part of something important." "You are part of something important," Ethan replied, cupping her face in his hands. "You're part of my life now, and that's the most important thing I've got." Their goodnight kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, the kind of kiss that spoke of lazy Sunday mornings and shared dreams and a future bright with possibility. As Ethan watched her drive away, his heart full to bursting, he realized that somewhere between that first coffee spill and tonight's slow dance, he'd stopped falling and started flying. Sophia wasn't just the woman he was dating. She was the woman he wanted to build a life with. The woman he wanted to wake up next to every morning for the rest of his life. And judging by the way she'd looked at him tonight, the way she'd melted into his arms and whispered his name like a prayer, he was beginning to think she might want the same thing. Chapter 5. The Storm and the Shelter. The weather forecast had called for scattered thunderstorms, but the reality turned out to be something entirely different. What hit Chicago that Tuesday evening was the kind of storm that made the evening news, the kind that sent people scurrying for shelter and reminded everyone that nature was still the ultimate force. Ethan and Sophia had planned a simple movie night at his apartment, take-out pizza, a romantic comedy she'd been wanting to see, and the comfortable intimacy they'd developed over their 3 months of dating. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, just an evening together after Sophia's long shift at the hospital. But nature, it seemed, had other plans. The first rumble of thunder came just as Sophia arrived at Ethan's building, her hair slightly damp from the light drizzle that had started during her drive over. She was wearing jeans and one of his old college sweatshirts that she'd borrowed weeks ago and never returned. Not that Ethan minded. She looked beautiful in his clothes. Looked like she belonged in his life, in his space, in his heart. "Perfect timing," Ethan said, pulling her into his arms for a kiss that tasted like rain and promises. "Good, because I'm starving," Sophia replied, melting into his embrace. "Long day. We had 3 new admissions, and little Timmy Rogers spiked a fever that had everyone worried for a while." Ethan listened as she told him about her day, his hands running soothingly up and down her back. He loved these moments, the way she trusted him with her fears and frustrations, the way she leaned on him when she needed comfort. It made him feel needed, important, like he was building something meaningful with this incredible woman. They were settling onto his couch with glasses of wine when the storm truly began in earnest. The gentle patter of rain against the windows quickly escalated to a driving downpour, and the rumble of thunder grew closer and more frequent. "Wow," Sophia said, curling up against Ethan's side. "It's really coming down out there." "Good thing we're inside," Ethan murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Perfect night to stay in and watch movies." But even as he said it, the lights flickered ominously. They'd just finished their pizza and were debating which movie to start with when the power went out completely, plunging the apartment into darkness. Outside, the storm raged with increasing intensity, wind howling around the building and rain hammering against the windows like it was trying to get in. "Well," Ethan said after a moment of stunned silence, "this is unexpected." Sophia's laugh was soft in the darkness. "Good thing I'm not afraid of storms." "Are you afraid of anything?" Ethan asked, fumbling for the emergency flashlight he kept in the coffee table drawer. "Plenty of things," Sophia replied honestly. "Spiders, horror movies, the idea of outliving everyone I love, heights sunless. I'm with someone who makes me feel safe." "Do I make you feel safe?" Ethan asked softly, finding the flashlight and clicking it on. The small circle of light illuminated Sophia's face, making her eyes look even more beautiful in the soft glow. "Always," she said simply, and the honesty in her voice made his chest tight with emotion. Ethan found candles scattered throughout the apartment, the remnants of previous romantic dinners and power outages. Soon, the living room was bathed in the warm, flickering glow of a dozen flames, creating an intimacy that electricity could never match. The storm still raged outside, but inside Ethan's apartment, there was only warmth and soft light, and the woman he loved curled up beside him on the couch. "This is actually kind of perfect," Sophia said, accepting the blanket Ethan wrapped around both of them. "Romantic. Even every moment with you is romantic," Ethan replied. And though it should have sounded cheesy, it came out completely sincere. They talked quietly as the storm raged around them, their voices soft in the candlelit darkness. Without the distraction of phones or television or the usual buzz of modern life, they found themselves sharing things they'd never shared before, deeper truths, hidden fears, childhood memories that shaped who they'd become. "Tell me about them," Ethan said gently when Sophia mentioned her parents. "Your mom and dad." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on Ethan's chest where his shirt lay open at the collar. "My dad was this gentle giant of a man, 6'4", but afraid of spiders. He used to call my mom to come kill them for him, and she'd do it while rolling her eyes and muttering about brave men who fight fires for a living, but can't handle an arachnid." "He was a firefighter?" "Yeah. And my mom was a teacher. They met when he came to her school to talk about fire safety, and she later told me she knew she was going to marry him the moment he smiled at her second-grade class." Sophia's voice grew softer, more wistful. "They were so in love, Ethan. Even after 15 years of marriage, they still held hands when they walked, still left each other little notes in lunchboxes and briefcases. They made love look easy." Ethan's arms tightened around her, offering silent comfort as she continued. "The night they died, they were coming home from a date, their 23rd wedding anniversary. They'd gone to the same restaurant where they had their first date, ordered the same meals, probably talked about me and my plans for high school, and whether I'd ever get brave enough to try out for the volleyball team." Sophia's voice broke slightly. A drunk driver ran a red light. "They died holding hands." "Sophia," Ethan whispered, his heart breaking for the 12-year-old girl who'd lost everything in one horrible moment. "I was so angry for so long," she continued, her tears falling freely now. "Angry at them for leaving me, angry at God for taking them, angry at the world for continuing to spin when mine had stopped completely. Nana Ruby tried everything, therapy, support groups, even a puppy. But I was just this bitter, broken little girl who couldn't understand why love had to hurt so much." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, using his thumbs to gently wipe away her tears. "What changed?" "Time, and Nana Ruby's stubborn love, and eventually the realization that being angry wasn't honoring their memory, it was wasting the life they'd given me." Sophia leaned into his touch, finding comfort in his gentle caresses. "I decided I wanted to love like they did, fearlessly, completely. I wanted to find someone who would choose me every day, who would hold my hand through everything life threw at us. Have you? Ethan asked softly. Found that someone? Sophia looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears and something deeper, something that made his breath catch. I think I have. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning and hope and the kind of love that changes everything. Ethan felt his heart stop, then start again at a rhythm that belonged entirely to her. Sophia, he whispered. I love you, she said simply, the words falling from her lips like a prayer. I love your gentle hands and your kind heart and the way you see beauty in everything. I love how you listen to me talk about my work like it's the most fascinating thing in the world. I love how you make me feel safe and cherished and like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Ethan felt tears prick at his own eyes as he absorbed her words, the gift of her love settling into his chest like a key turning in a lock. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. God, Sophia, I love you so much, it scares me sometimes. I love how you care for people, how you see the good in everyone, how you make me want to be better than I am. I love your laugh and your terrible coffee and the way you steal my sweatshirts and look better in them than I ever did. They were both crying now, holding each other in the candlelight, while the storm raged outside, and their hearts finally spoke the truth they'd been carrying for weeks. I was so scared after what happened with Nathan, Sophia said quietly, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. Tell me about him, Ethan said gently, though part of him dreaded the answer. Sophia took a shaky breath. We dated for 2 years. I thought we were building something real, but when it came time to actually commit, she paused, gathering courage. He left me at the altar. He said he realized he couldn't promise forever because he wasn't sure he loved me enough. Ethan felt anger surge through him, but he kept his voice gentle. That must have been devastating. It was. But maybe, she looked up at him, maybe it was also necessary. If I'd married him, I never would have been free to fall in love with you. You really think this is love? Ethan asked softly. I know it is, she whispered. I love you, Ethan. Not the careful, measured way I thought I loved Nathan. This is different. This is everything. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. More than I knew was possible. Someday, Ethan said suddenly, the words coming from his heart before his brain could stop them, when the time is right, when we're both ready, I want to marry you, Sophia. Sophia pulled back to look at him, her eyes wide. Ethan, I don't have a ring, and this isn't a proposal, he said quickly. I just need you to know that I can't imagine my life without you. You're the person I want to build a future with. How long? Sophia asked softly. How long do you think we should wait before we're sure? Ethan considered carefully. My parents dated for 3 years before they got engaged. Maybe we should give ourselves time to really know each other through different seasons, different challenges. That sounds wise, Sophia agreed. But, Ethan? Yes? When you do ask me properly, the answer will be yes. They spent the rest of the night wrapped in each other's arms on the couch, talking quietly and sharing soft kisses and gentle caresses. They spoke about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears, about the future. They planned imaginary vacations and debated baby names and described the house they'd build together someday. When Sophia fell asleep, curled against his chest, Ethan lay awake, listening to the storm gradually subside, watching the candles burn low, memorizing the feel of her in his arms and the sound of her breathing. This was the moment, he realized, when his real life had begun. Everything before Sophia had just been preparation for this, for her, for them, for the love that was going to define the rest of his days. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and sparkling in the early sunlight. Power had been restored, and the world outside Ethan's windows looked fresh and new, full of possibility. Sophia woke up slowly, stretching in Ethan's arms like a contented cat. Good morning, she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. Good morning, beautiful, Ethan replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. How did you sleep? Better than I have in years, she said honestly. There's something about being in your arms that makes everything feel right. I know exactly what you mean, Ethan said softly. As they made breakfast together in his kitchen, Sophia scrambling eggs while Ethan made coffee that was actually drinkable, both of them knew that something fundamental had shifted during the storm. They'd crossed a line from dating to something deeper, something permanent. They'd found their forever in each other's arms, while the world raged around them, and neither of them would ever be the same. "I love you," Sophia said suddenly, turning from the stove to look at him with eyes bright with happiness. "I love you too," Ethan replied, pulling her into his arms right there in the kitchen, not caring that the eggs were still cooking or that they were both still in yesterday's clothes. They had found their shelter in each other, and no storm would ever touch them again. Chapter 6. The Test of Distance. The offer came on a Thursday morning in late spring, delivered via email to Sophia's work account with the kind of official letterhead that made her heart race. Seattle Children's Hospital was inviting her to participate in their prestigious pediatric intensive care training program. 3 months of advanced certification that would open doors to opportunities she'd only dreamed about. It was everything she'd worked towards since nursing school, the kind of career advancement that could change her entire future. It was also 2,000 miles away from the man she loved more than her next breath. Sophia stared at the email for a full 10 minutes, reading it over and over until the words blurred together. This was her dream job, her chance to become the kind of nurse she'd always wanted to be. But it meant leaving Ethan for 3 months, leaving their still new love to survive on phone calls and video chats, and the hope that distance wouldn't change what they'd built together. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. "Hey, beautiful," Ethan answered on the second ring, his voice warm with the smile she could picture perfectly. "Missing me already? I just dropped you off an hour ago." "Ethan," she said. And something in her tone must have caught his attention because his voice immediately grew concerned. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said quickly. "But I need to tell you something. Can you meet me for lunch?" "Of course." "The usual place?" "The usual place," she confirmed, already reaching for her jacket. An hour later, they sat across from each other at their favorite corner table in the little cafe where they'd shared so many lunches over the past 4 months. Ethan's face was etched with worry as Sophia told him about the offer, his hands clasped tightly around his coffee cup like he was trying to anchor himself. 3 months, he said quietly when she finished explaining. 3 months, she confirmed, her own voice barely above a whisper. They sat in silence for a long moment, both processing what this meant. Finally, Ethan reached across the table and took her hands in his. "You have to go," he said firmly. "Ethan, no. Listen to me," he interrupted, his brown eyes serious and full of love. "This is your dream, Sophia. This is everything you've worked for. I won't be the man who holds you back from becoming who you're meant to be." Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes. "But 3 months apart will be the longest 90 days of my life," Ethan admitted. "But at the end of it, you'll come home to me with new skills and experiences and stories to tell. You'll be even more amazing than you already are, which I didn't think was possible." What if Sophia started, then stopped, unable to voice her deepest fear? "What if what?" Ethan prompted gently. "What if the distance changes things? What if we can't make it work? What if you realize you're better off without me?" The words tumbled out in a rush, all the insecurities she'd been carrying since Nathan left her at the altar spilling into the space between them. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up and moved to the chair beside her, taking her face in his hands with the gentle reverence she'd come to associate with his touch. "Sophia Grace Thompson," he said softly, "do you remember what I told you during the storm? You're my forever person. That doesn't change because of geography. That doesn't change because of time. That doesn't change, period." "You're sure?" she whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he replied, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like love and faith and unshakable commitment. 2 weeks later, Ethan drove Sophia to O'Hare Airport with a trunk full of her belongings and a heart heavy with impending separation. They'd spent every possible moment together since she'd accepted the position, storing up memories and conversations and touches to sustain them through the coming months. The night before her flight, they'd lain in his bed, talking until dawn, their bodies intertwined and their voices soft in the darkness. "I'm going to miss everything about you," Sophia had whispered against his chest. "Your laugh, your terrible jokes, the way you hum while you're working, the way you make me feel like the most important person in the world. I'm going to miss watching you get ready for work," Ethan had replied, his fingers combing through her hair. "The way you always steal my coffee even though you claim you don't like it. The way you fall asleep during movies and deny it later. the way you make every day brighter just by being in it. Now, standing in the departure terminal with her boarding announcement echoing around them, the reality of separation hit them both like a physical blow. 3 months, Ethan said, pulling her into his arms one last time. 90 days, Sophia agreed, breathing in his scent and trying to memorize everything about this moment. The feel of his strong arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, the way he made her feel safe and loved even in the middle of goodbye. I love you, he whispered into her hair. That's not going to change. Not ever. I love you too, she replied, pulling back to look at his face one more time. Don't forget me while I'm gone. Impossible, Ethan said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You're burned into my heart, Sophia Grace. There's no forgetting you. Their goodbye kiss was passionate and desperate, full of 3 months' worth of longing compressed into a single moment. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. Go, Ethan said gently, though his hands were reluctant to let her go. Go change the world. Call me tonight, Sophia asked, already backing toward the security line. Every night, he promised, and every morning, and probably a few times in between. The first week was the hardest. The 3-hour time difference meant they were constantly missing each other's calls, leaving voicemails that conveyed longing but not the comfort of actual conversation. Ethan threw himself into work with an intensity that worried his colleagues, while Sophia dove into her training program with the kind of focus that impressed her instructors but left her emotionally drained. But they found their rhythm. Every morning at 7 o'clock a.m. Chicago time, 5 o'clock a.m. Seattle time, they FaceTimed over coffee. Ethan would still be disheveled from sleep, his hair sticking up in ways that made Sophia's heart ache with love and longing. Sophia would be dressed for work but not yet fully awake, her eyes soft and her voice husky in a way that made Ethan wish he could reach through the screen and pull her back into bed with him. Good morning. Beautiful became Ethan's daily greeting, no matter how tired he was or how early he'd had to wake up. Good morning, handsome, Sophia would reply. And they'd spend 30 minutes talking about their plans for the day, sharing coffee across 2 time zones and pretending the distance didn't exist. Their evening calls were longer, more intimate. Ethan would tell her about his progress on the hospital playground, about funny things his coworkers had said, about how he'd rearranged his apartment twice because it felt too empty without her things scattered around. Sophia would share stories about her patients, about the incredible things she was learning, about how she missed falling asleep in his arms more than she'd thought possible. Tell me about your day became their ritual. And they'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing, their voices the last thing they heard before sleep and the first thing they thought about upon waking. The care packages started in week 2. Ethan sent flowers to her hotel every Friday, a different variety each time, always with a note that made her cry happy tears. Sophia sent him cookies and photos of Seattle sunsets and handwritten letters that he read so many times. The paper grew soft from handling. I saw Mount Rainier today, she wrote in one letter. It was so beautiful it took my breath away. But then I realized that nothing, no mountain, no sunset, no work of art will ever be as beautiful to me as your smile when you're happy. I miss that smile. I miss you. Ethan carried that letter in his wallet and read it whenever the loneliness threatened to overwhelm him. The visits were both salvation and torture. Ethan flew to Seattle twice during Sophia's program, spending long weekends in her hotel room, making love and talking, and pretending they could freeze time. Their reunions were explosive with passion. They could barely make it out of the airport before falling into each other's arms, desperate to reconnect after weeks of separation. I miss this, Sophia gasped the first time he visited, her hands frantically working at his shirt buttons in the hotel elevator. I missed you so much. Never again, Ethan replied fiercely, his mouth hot against her neck. Never again this long. But even as they lost themselves in each other, the clock was ticking toward his departure, making every moment bittersweet. Sophia flew home for one weekend in the middle of her program, and Ethan picked her up at the airport with flowers and tears in his eyes. They spent 48 hours barely leaving his apartment, making up for lost time and storing up memories to sustain them through the final month. I don't know how couples do this long term, Sophia said as they lay tangled in his sheets on Sunday afternoon, her flight leaving in just a few hours. Love, Ethan replied simply. Real love survives anything. Is that what we have? she asked, tracing patterns on his chest. Real love? The realest, he confirmed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. The kind that lasts forever. The technology helped, but it could never replace physical presence. They started leaving their video calls on while they went about their evening routines, creating the illusion of sharing space even across the distance. Ethan would work on architectural drawings while Sophia studied for her certification exams, both of them comforted by the presence of the other, even through a screen. This is nice, Sophia said one evening, looking up from her textbooks to see Ethan sketching at his kitchen table. It almost feels like we're in the same room. Almost, Ethan agreed, though his eyes were sad. Not quite, but almost. The letters became more frequent and more intimate as the weeks passed. Ethan wrote about his dreams for their future, about the house he wanted to build for them, about how he'd started looking at engagement rings during his lunch breaks. Sophia wrote about the children she was helping, about how her experiences were changing her as a nurse and as a person, about how everything she learned made her more excited to come home and build a life with him. I'm becoming the person I want to be for you, she wrote in her final letter. Not because you need me to change, but because loving you makes me want to be the best version of myself. Seattle has taught me so much, but the most important thing I've learned is that home isn't a place. It's a person. And you, Ethan Carter, are my home. The night before her return, they talked until 3 o'clock a.m. Chicago time, 1 o'clock a.m. Seattle time, both too excited and nervous to sleep. Tomorrow, Ethan said, his face tired but radiant on her laptop screen. Tomorrow, Sophia agreed. I can't believe it's finally here. I have a surprise for you, Ethan said, and something in his expression made her heart race. What kind of surprise? The kind you'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out, he replied, with a grin that made her stomach flutter. Ethan Carter, that's not fair, she protested. Nothing about this separation has been fair, he said softly. But it's almost over. In less than 24 hours, you'll be back in my arms, where you belong. As her plane descended toward Chicago, Sophia pressed her face to the window and watched the city lights spread out below her like scattered diamonds. Somewhere down there was Ethan, was home, was the future she'd been dreaming about for 90 long days and nights. The moment she saw him waiting for her at the gate, holding flowers and wearing the biggest smile she'd ever seen, all the pain of separation melted away. They ran toward each other like something out of a movie, and when he swept her into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time, Sophia knew with absolute certainty that their love could survive anything. Welcome home, Ethan whispered against her lips as he set her down. I'm never leaving again, she replied, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. Good, he said, pulling back to look at her face, to memorize her features all over again. Because I have something to ask you, and I'd prefer to do it when we're in the same zip code. Sophia's heart stopped. Ethan. Not here, he said quickly, glancing around at the crowded terminal. Later, when we're alone, when I can do this properly. As they walked toward baggage claim, hand in hand, Sophia realized that the 3 months in Seattle hadn't weakened their love. They'd proven it. Distance had tested them, challenged them, forced them to choose each other again and again across 2,000 miles in 3 time zones. And they had chosen each other every day, every night, every lonely moment when it would have been easier to give up. Now they were stronger, surer, ready for whatever came next. And judging by the nervous energy radiating from Ethan and the small velvet box, she'd glimpsed him slip into his pocket when he thought she wasn't looking. What came next was going to change everything. Chapter 7. Coming Home to Forever. Sophia had been home for exactly 6 hours, and Ethan was already a nervous wreck. He'd planned everything down to the smallest detail during her last week in Seattle. The timing, the location, the words he wanted to say. He'd practiced his speech in the mirror until he could recite it perfectly, had the ring appraised and resized, and even called Nana Ruby to ask for her blessing, which she'd given with tears in her eyes and a fierce hug that nearly cracked his ribs. But now, sitting in his living room, watching Sophia unpack her Seattle souvenirs and tell him stories about her final days at the program, he felt like a teenager about to ask someone to practice. And then Dr. Morrison said it was the most impressive presentation from a visiting nurse he'd seen in 5 years, Sophia was saying, her eyes bright with pride and exhaustion. Can you believe that? Me, Little Sophia Thompson from Chicago, impressing the head of pediatric intensive care at one of the best hospitals in the country. I can absolutely believe it, Ethan said, and the love in his voice made her pause in her unpacking to look at him. You're incredible, Sophia. You always have been, but these 3 months you're glowing with confidence. It looks beautiful on you. She crossed the room to where he sat on the couch and settled into his lap, her arms winding around his neck. I miss this, she said softly. Being able to just touch you whenever I wanted. Ethan's arms tightened around her, his heart hammering against his ribs. The ring box felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket, but he forced himself to wait. He had plans, and he wanted this to be perfect for her. Are you hungry? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. I thought we could go out for dinner somewhere special. Actually, Sophia said, pulling back to meet his eyes, I was hoping we could just stay in tonight. Order pizza, watch a movie. Just be together. I've missed quiet nights with you more than anything. Ethan felt a moment of panic. His entire plan depended on getting her to the empty lot where he wanted to build their house, where he'd spent hours yesterday setting up string lights and preparing the perfect romantic proposal. But looking at her tired but happy face, he realized that maybe spontaneous could be just as perfect as planned. Pizza sounds great, he said, kissing her softly. But first, I want to show you something. A surprise I mentioned yesterday. Sophia's eyes lit up with curiosity. What kind of surprise? The kind that requires a short drive, Ethan said, trying to keep his voice casual despite the fact that his pulse was racing. Trust me. Always, she said without hesitation, and the simple faith in that word made his chest tight with emotion. An hour later, they were driving through a quiet residential neighborhood on the outskirts of the city as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Sophia had peppered him with questions about where they were going, but Ethan had deflected each one with a mysterious smile that made her stomach flutter with anticipation. Here, he said finally, pulling up to an empty lot on a tree-lined street. We're here. Sophia looked around, confused. It was a beautiful piece of property, large and flat with mature oak trees around the perimeter, but it was clearly undeveloped land. Ethan, what? But then she saw them. String lights hung between the trees like stars brought down to earth, creating a canopy of soft golden illumination over the entire lot. A blanket was spread in the center of the space, with battery-powered lanterns creating a circle of warm light. Oh my God, she breathed, her hand flying to her heart. Ethan, what is this? This, he said, his voice thick with emotion as he took her hand, is where I want to build our house. Sophia turned to stare at him, her eyes wide with shock and something deeper. Our house? Come on, he said gently, leading her toward the blanket. Let me show you. They walked slowly across the lot, Ethan pointing out features of the property that he'd fallen in love with during his search. That oak tree there, that's where I want to put a swing for our kids. And over there, with the afternoon sun, that's where I envision a big kitchen window so you can watch them play while you're cooking. Ethan, Sophia whispered. But he wasn't finished. The master bedroom would face east so we could wake up with the sunrise. And there's room for a workshop in the back where I could build furniture, and you could have a garden if you wanted one. His voice grew softer, more emotional with each word. I've been coming here every day since you left, planning our life together, imagining our future. They reached the blanket, and Ethan turned to face her, his hands shaking as he took both of hers in his. The string lights cast dancing shadows across their faces, and in the distance, the first stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Sophia, Ethan began, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. 3 months ago, you left for Seattle, and I thought I knew what missing someone felt like. I was wrong. Missing you wasn't just an emotion, it was a physical ache, a constant reminder that half of my soul was 2,000 miles away. Tears were already gathering in Sophia's eyes, her hands trembling in his. Every morning when I woke up alone, every evening when I came home to an empty apartment, every moment I wanted to share something with you, and couldn't, it all made me realize something I should have known from the moment you spilled coffee on my blueprints. Ethan released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, his heart pounding so hard he was amazed she couldn't hear it. You're not just the woman I love, Sophia Grace. You're not just my girlfriend or my partner or my best friend. You're my home. You're the person I want to wake up next to every morning for the rest of my life. The person I want to build dreams with. The person I want to grow old and gray with. He dropped to one knee on the soft blanket, pulling out the ring box with hands that shook with nerves and love and desperate hope. Sophia gasped, her free hand flying to cover her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. You're the woman I want to marry, Sophia Grace Thompson. Will you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife? The ring was perfect. A classic solitaire with a band that incorporated a small piece of wood from the oak tree where they'd shared their first kiss, just as he'd promised months ago. It caught the light from the string lights and sparkled like the stars beginning to appear overhead. Ethan, Sophia sobbed, dropping to her knees on the blanket to meet him at eye level. Yes, 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 1,000 times yes. The moment the word left her lips, Ethan's careful composure crumbled. His hands shook as he slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he looked up to meet her eyes, tears were streaming down his face. Really? He asked, his voice breaking. You'll marry me? I'll marry you, she confirmed, cupping his face in her hands. I'll marry you and build a house with you, and wake up next to you every morning and love you until my dying breath. Their kiss was desperate and joyful and full of 3 months of separation and a lifetime of promises. They fell back onto the blanket together, laughing and crying and holding each other as if they could make up for every moment they'd been apart. I love you, Ethan whispered against her lips. I love you so much. I love you too, Sophia replied, pulling back to look at the ring on her finger to make sure this was real. It's beautiful, Ethan. It's perfect. Look closer, he said with a smile that was pure joy. Sophia tilted the ring toward the lantern light and gasped when she saw the small piece of wood inlaid in the band. Is this from our tree? Ethan confirmed. The oak, where we had our first kiss. I wanted you to carry a piece of where our love began with you always. Fresh tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. How did you even manage that? I may have called in a few favors, Ethan admitted, and spent a very awkward afternoon explaining to a tree surgeon why I needed a small piece of bark from a tree in a public park. Sophia laughed through her tears, the sound bright and musical in the evening air. You're insane. I can't believe you actually did that. I can't believe you said yes, Ethan replied, still somewhat stunned by his good fortune. Of course I said yes, Sophia said, settling more comfortably against his chest. I told you that night during the storm. Ask me in 6 months, and I'll say yes. You asked me in 5 months and 3 days. But close enough. You counted? Ethan asked, delighted. I've been counting every day since Seattle, she admitted, wondering when you'd ask, hoping you still wanted to, praying I hadn't imagined how sure you sounded that night. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Ethan said firmly. Even when you were 2,000 miles away, even when I missed you so much I could barely function, I never doubted for a second that you were the woman I wanted to spend forever with. They lay on the blanket for hours, talking about their wedding, their future, the house they'd build on this very spot. Sophia described the kind of ceremony she'd always dreamed of. Something simple and beautiful, surrounded by the people they loved most. Ethan talked about the honeymoon he wanted to plan, places he wanted to show her, adventures they'd have as husband and wife. When? Sophia asked as the night grew cooler and they pulled the extra blanket Ethan had brought around their shoulders. When do you want to get married? Soon, or do you want a long engagement? Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering. What do you want? I want to marry you tomorrow, Sophia said honestly. I've already waited 26 years to find you, and I don't want to wait much longer to call you my husband. But I also want Nana Ruby to be happy, and she'll want time to plan and fuss and make sure everything is perfect. What would make you happiest? Ethan asked. 6 months, Sophia said after a moment's thought. Long enough to plan something beautiful, but not so long that I have to wait forever to marry you. 6 months it is, Ethan agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Mrs. Carter. The name sent shivers through Sophia that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. Say it again. Mrs. Carter, Ethan repeated, his voice warm with love and promise. I like the sound of that, Sophia murmured against his chest. As they sat together on the blanket afterward, sharing quiet promises about their future, car headlights appeared at the edge of the lot. Ethan, Sophia started, confused. Did you? I may have texted a few people, Ethan admitted sheepishly, as familiar figures emerged from the cars. I wanted to celebrate with everyone who loves us. Nana Ruby appeared first, moving faster than her age should have allowed, followed by Ethan's parents and a small group of their closest friends and family. Congratulations, called Olivia, holding up a bottle of champagne. We've been waiting in the parking lot for 20 minutes. You all knew? Sophia laughed through her tears. Honey, this boy asked my permission 3 weeks ago, Nana Ruby said, pulling them both into fierce hugs. Did you really think I could keep that secret without backup? The impromptu celebration was perfect in its simplicity. Champagne shared from plastic cups, Nana Ruby's cake served on paper plates, and the warmth of family surrounding their newly engaged happiness. I can't believe you all hid in the parking lot this whole time, Sophia laughed, accepting hugs and admiring her ring for what felt like the 100th time. We got here right. As Ethan was getting down on one knee, Olivia said with tears in her eyes. It was the most romantic thing I've ever seen. We were all crying. Even my dad, Ethan added, nodding toward his usually stoic father, who was deep in conversation with Nana Ruby and looking suspiciously emotional. As the impromptu party wound down and their loved ones began to head home, Ethan and Sophia found themselves alone again under the string lights, engaged and overwhelmed and happier than either had ever thought possible. This was perfect, Sophia said softly, leaning against Ethan's chest as they watched the last car disappear down the street. The proposal, the surprise, all of it. Perfect. It was, wasn't it? Ethan agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Though I have to admit, I was terrified you'd say no. Never, Sophia said firmly. I've been yours since that first day in the coffee shop. It just took me a while to realize it. Come on, Ethan said, standing and helping her to her feet. Let's go home and start planning our wedding. Our wedding, Sophia repeated, testing the words and finding them perfect. I can't wait to marry you, Ethan Carter. I can't wait to marry you too, Sophia Grace Thompson, he replied. Though I suppose it'll be Sophia Grace Carter soon enough. As they packed up the blanket and lanterns, both of them stealing glances at the ring on Sophia's finger and marveling at how much their lives had changed in the space of a single evening, they knew they'd remember this night forever. The night they chose forever. The night they promised each other always. The night they decided to build their future together on this very spot. 3 months of separation had only proven what they'd known all along. They were meant to be together, meant to love each other, meant to build something beautiful and lasting and true. And now, finally, they were engaged to do exactly that. Chapter 8. Wedding Bells and New Beginnings. 6 months had never passed so quickly or so slowly at the same time. Sophia stood in the bridal suite at the Chicago History Museum, staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror, while Olivia and 2 of her fellow nurses from Children's Memorial fussed with the delicate buttons running down the back of her dress. The gown was perfect. Flowing ivory silk with a fitted bodice and a skirt that moved like water when she walked. It had belonged to her mother, carefully preserved by Nana Ruby, and altered to fit Sophia's slightly smaller frame. You look like an angel, whispered Lily, one of the young nurses, tears already gathering in her eyes despite the ceremony still being an hour away. Don't you dare start crying yet, Olivia warned, though her own voice was thick with emotion. We haven't even done your fail. Sophia touched the pearl necklace at her throat, another piece from her mother, and tried to calm the butterflies doing aerial acrobatics in her stomach. In 1 hour, she would walk down the aisle and marry the man of her dreams. After everything they'd been through, all the obstacles they'd overcome, she was finally going to become Mrs. Ethan Carter. The thought made her smile so wide, her cheeks hurt. Earth to Sophia, Olivia said, waving her hand in front of her face. You're glowing again. It's almost creepy how happy you look. I can't help it, Sophia laughed. I get to marry Ethan in an hour. How am I supposed to contain this much joy? A soft knock at the door interrupted them, and Nana Ruby's voice called out, Can an old woman come see her granddaughter? Come in, Nana, Sophia called, turning toward the door. Nana Ruby stepped into the room, wearing a beautiful lavender dress and a hat with a small veil that made her look elegant and timeless. But it was the expression on her face that made Sophia's breath catch, pure love mixed with bittersweet memories and overwhelming pride. Oh, Baby girl, Nana Ruby whispered, her hands flying to her heart. You look just like your mama did on her wedding day. The words hit Sophia like a gentle wave, and she felt tears threaten despite her careful makeup. Really? Really, Nana Ruby confirmed, moving closer to take Sophia's hands in her weathered ones. She would be so proud of you, sweetheart. So proud of the woman you've become, the man you've chosen, the love you found. I wish they could be here, Sophia said softly. They are here, Nana Ruby said firmly. In your heart, in your smile, in the way you love that boy with everything you've got. Love like that doesn't die, baby. It just changes forms. Olivia handed them both tissues, rolling her eyes at her own tears. You two are going to ruin all our hard work on makeup. 20 minutes later, Sophia's veil was in place, and her makeup had been carefully repaired. She looked like a fairy tale princess, radiant with happiness and anticipation. A second knock at the door revealed Lucas, Sophia's surrogate brother, and the man who would walk her down the aisle. Holy Lucas started, then caught himself as 4 women glared at him. I mean, wow, Soph, you look incredible. Thank you, Sophia said, accepting his hug carefully to avoid crushing her dress. How's Ethan? Is he nervous? Nervous? The man's been pacing for 2 hours. I think he's worn a track in the carpet. Lucas laughed. But happy. I've never seen anyone look so completely, ridiculously happy. Meanwhile, in the groom's suite across the building, Ethan was indeed pacing while his best man, his college roommate Jake, tried to get him to sit still long enough to fix his tie. You look fine, Jake said, for the 10th time. Better than fine. You look like a man about to marry the love of his life. That's because I am, Ethan replied, checking his watch again. 45 more minutes. 45 more minutes, his father confirmed from his chair by the window. William Carter wasn't normally an emotional man, but watching his son prepare to marry the woman who transformed him into the happiest version of himself was bringing out feelings he rarely allowed himself to express. You know, William said quietly, I wasn't sure you'd ever find someone who could make you this happy. Ethan stopped pacing to look at his father in surprise. They'd never been particularly close. William's work had always come first, but the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. She's special, Ethan said simply. She is, William agreed. And so are you, son. So are you. The ceremony was set to take place in the museum's beautiful outdoor courtyard, with the Chicago skyline providing a dramatic backdrop. 200 guests filled white chairs arranged in neat rows, string quartet music floating through the air as family and friends settled into their seats. Ethan took his place at the altar, a simple arch decorated with white roses and ivy, and tried to remember how to breathe. His hands were steady, his mind clear, but his heart was racing with anticipation. In just a few minutes, Sophia would walk through those doors, and their real life together would begin. The music changed, signaling the start of the processional. Olivia appeared first, in a flowing, dusty rose dress, her smile radiant as she walked slowly down the aisle. Lily and the other bridesmaid followed, both glowing with excitement for their friend. Then the music swelled into the opening notes of At Last, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Sophia appeared in the doorway like a vision, her arm linked through Lucas's her face luminous behind the delicate lace of her veil. The dress moved around her like liquid moonlight, and the afternoon sun caught the pearls at her throat and made them gleam. But it was her smile that undid him completely. She was looking directly at him as she walked down the aisle, her eyes bright with tears of joy and love so pure it took his breath away. He felt his own tears start to fall, and didn't even try to stop them. Let everyone see how much he loved this woman, how grateful he was that she'd chosen him, how amazed he was that this moment was real. The walk down the aisle felt eternal and instant at the same time. Sophia was dimly aware of their guests rising to their feet, of cameras flashing and people crying, but all she could see was Ethan waiting for her at the altar. He looked devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that made her knees weak. Pure, overwhelming love mixed with awe and gratitude, and the kind of joy that changed everything. When they reached the altar, Lucas placed Sophia's hand in Ethan's with a kiss to her cheek and a whispered, "Be happy, little sister." Dearly beloved, the officiant began, but Ethan barely heard the opening words. He was lost in Sophia's eyes, in the feel of her hand in his, in the reality that they were finally here, finally doing this, finally making it official. The ceremony passed in a blur of traditional words and personal touches. They'd written their own vows, and when the time came to recite them, both Ethan and Sophia's voices were thick with emotion. "Sophia Grace," Ethan began, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard. "You came into my life like sunshine after a storm, bringing light to places I didn't even know were dark. You've taught me that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice, a commitment, a daily decision to choose each other no matter what life brings." He paused, swallowing hard as he looked into her tear-filled eyes. "I promise to love you fiercely and tenderly, to support your dreams even when they take you far from me, to hold your hand through every joy and sorrow life brings our way. I promise to make you laugh when you're sad, to listen when you need to talk, to give you space when you need solitude, and to hold you close when you need comfort." His voice broke slightly on the final words. "I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life, to build a beautiful future with you, and to love you with everything I have until my dying breath." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience, and Sophia was openly crying as she began her own vows. "Ethan," she said, her voice clear despite her tears, "you are my safe harbor, my greatest adventure, my home. You've shown me that love can be gentle and strong at the same time, that it can heal old wounds and create new possibilities." She squeezed his hands, drawing strength from his touch. "I promise to love you with the same fearless devotion my parents showed each other, to be your partner in all things, to celebrate your successes and comfort you through disappointments. I promise to grow with you, to change with you, to face whatever challenges come our way as a team." Her voice grew stronger, more confident. "I promise to fill our home with laughter and our life with adventure, to support your dreams and share my own, to be the soft place you fall and the cheerleader who pushes you to reach higher." She looked directly into his eyes for the final words. "I promise to choose you every day, to love you completely, and to build something beautiful and lasting with you. You are my forever person, Ethan Carter, and I am yours." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan cupped Sophia's face in his hands with the reverence of a man holding something precious and irreplaceable. "I love you, Mrs. Carter," he whispered. And then he kissed her with all the passion and promise of their new beginning. The kiss was met with thunderous applause and cheers from their guests. But Ethan and Sophia were lost in their own world. Finally married. Finally united, in the way they'd both dreamed of, for months. The reception was held in the museum's grand hall, with round tables decorated in white and gold and a dance floor that gleamed under sparkling chandeliers. The meal was perfect, the toasts were heartfelt and hilarious. And through it all, Ethan and Sophia couldn't stop touching each other. Hands clasped under the table, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm, her hand resting on his thigh. "Ladies and gentlemen," the band leader announced as dinner concluded, "please join the bride and groom for their first dance as husband and wife." Ethan led Sophia onto the dance floor as the opening notes of "The Way You Look Tonight" filled the air. She fit perfectly in his arms, her dress swirling around them as they moved together with the easy grace of two people completely in sync. "How does it feel?" Ethan murmured against her ear as they swayed together. "Perfect," Sophia replied, pulling back to smile at him. "Like everything I've ever wanted just came true." "We did it," Ethan said wonderingly. "We're actually married." "We're actually married," she confirmed, and they both started laughing with pure joy. As the song continued, their family and friends joined them on the dance floor, Nana Ruby dancing with Ethan's father, Lucas spinning Olivia around until she squealed with laughter, Ethan's mother wiping away happy tears as she danced with Jake. Later, after the cake had been cut and the bouquet thrown caught by Lily, who blushed furiously when one of the groomsmen winked at her, Ethan and Sophia stole away to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. "Mrs. Carter," Ethan said, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they looked out at the twinkling lights of Chicago. "I love the sound of that," Sophia sighed, leaning back against his chest. "Though I'm going to miss being Sophia Grace Thompson." "You'll always be Sophia Grace to me," Ethan assured her. "That's who I fell in love with. That's who I married. The name is just paperwork." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, both processing the magnitude of what they'd just done, the commitment they'd just made, the future that stretched out before them, bright with possibility. "Ready for Italy?" Ethan asked eventually. More than ready, Sophia replied. 2 weeks with my husband in the most romantic country in the world? I can't think of anything better. Their honeymoon in Tuscany was everything they dreamed of and more. They stayed in a centuries-old villa surrounded by vineyards and olive groves, spending their days exploring ancient towns and their evenings making love with the kind of passion that came from being completely, irrevocably committed to each other. Ethan sketched the incredible architecture they encountered, while Sophia learned to make fresh pasta from the villa's elderly cook, Nonna Lucia, who spoke no English but communicated perfectly through gestures and warm smiles. Amore, Nonna Lucia would say whenever she saw them together, pressing her hands to her heart and beaming at them with obvious delight. They visited Florence and Rome, climbed the tower in Pisa, and spent hours wandering through vineyards hand in hand, talking about their dreams for the future. Ethan described the house he wanted to build for them, while Sophia shared her hopes for their eventual children, for the life they'd create together. On their last night in Italy, they sat on the terrace of their villa, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sun set over the rolling hills. I don't want this to end, Sophia said softly, her head resting on Ethan's shoulder. It doesn't have to. Ethan replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. This is just the beginning, sweetheart. We have the rest of our lives to create moments like this. Promise? She asked, looking up at him with eyes that held all the love in the world. Promise, he confirmed, sealing it with a kiss that tasted like wine and wedding cake and the sweet promise of forever. As they flew back to Chicago 2 days later, both wearing wedding rings that caught the airplane lights and still glowing with honeymoon happiness, Ethan and Sophia knew that their real adventure was just beginning. They were no longer just dating or engaged. They were married, bonded, committed to building a beautiful life together. And the first step in that life would be breaking ground on their dream house, creating a home where their love could grow and flourish for decades to come. Ready to start building our forever? Ethan asked as their plane descended toward O'Hare. I've been ready since the day I met you, Sophia replied, squeezing his hand. Let's go home and start our life, Mr. Carter. I love the sound of that, Mrs. Carter, he said, and they both smiled at how perfectly, wonderfully right it felt to finally, officially, joyfully belong to each other. Chapter 9. The Gift of Life. 6 months of marriage had been perfect. Ethan and Sophia had settled into married life in their beautiful house. They'd been trying for a baby since their wedding night, but after 6 months without success, they wondered if something was wrong. Maybe we should see a specialist, Sophia suggested one evening. There's no rush, sweetheart. When the time is right, our baby will come, Ethan said, kissing her hair. 2 weeks later, during a busy hospital shift, sudden nausea sent Sophia racing to the staff bathroom. The nausea, her exhaustion, tender breasts, could it be? That evening, she bought a pregnancy test. Hands shaking with hope. In their bathroom, Sophia took the test and waited 3 minutes. When the timer went off, she saw 2 pink lines. Pregnant. Oh my God, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. We're having a baby. She found Ethan cooking dinner. He immediately noticed her tears. What's wrong? He asked. Nothing's wrong, Sophia laughed. Do you remember what you said about our baby being ready when the time was right? Ethan's eyes widened. Sophia, I think our baby decided the time is right, she said, showing him the test. Ethan stared at it, then at her. We're having a baby? We're having a baby, she confirmed. Ethan swept her into his arms, spinning her around while they both laughed and cried. Are you happy? Sophia asked. I'm so happy I don't have words for it. You're giving me everything I've ever wanted. The next weeks were filled with doctor's appointments and Ethan's protective mode. He researched everything and talked to her belly every night. Your mama is going to be the best mother, little one, he would say. At their 10-week appointment, Dr. Martinez performed the first ultrasound. Everything looks good. Strong heartbeat. Your due date is early June. A summer baby, Ethan said emotionally. Actually, Dr. Martinez said, adjusting the transducer, I'm seeing 2 gestational sacs. You're having twins. Silence filled the room before Ethan gasped. Twins? Identical twins, Dr. Martinez confirmed. This explains your extra fatigue. 2 babies, Ethan said faintly. The pregnancy progressed beautifully. At 24 weeks, they learned they were having girls, and Ethan cried, "Daughters," he whispered. "We're having daughters. 2 little girls who will have you wrapped around their fingers." Sophia smiled. They chose Faith Victoria and Joy Ruby. Ethan built matching cribs and painted butterflies on the nursery wall. The baby shower was overwhelming. Watching Ethan exclaim over tiny clothes made Sophia love him more. "They make clothes this small?" he marveled. "You'll find out soon," Nana Ruby said. By 36 weeks, Sophia was ready to meet her daughters. "Listen, girls," she'd tell her belly, "your mama is ready to see your faces." "No, they're probably excited to meet us," Ethan said. "I know I am." But Faith and Joy had their own timeline. At 37 weeks, Sophia woke at 2 o'clock alone. With a sharp contraction. "Was that?" Ethan asked, alert. "I think so." Sophia breathed as another hit. "Ethan, I think it's time." Ethan helped time contractions while packing their bag, called Dr. Martinez and Nana Ruby, then drove to the hospital. "We're going to meet our babies today," Sophia said through another contraction. "Today we become a family," Ethan confirmed. Chapter 10. Double the Love. 18 hours of labor tested every ounce of Sophia's strength. Ethan never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction, whispering words of love that gave her strength. "You're the strongest woman in the world," he murmured, as another contraction peaked. "I can't do this anymore," Sophia gasped, exhausted. "Yes, you can," he said, his voice firm. "You're almost there, sweetheart." "I can see the baby's head, Doctor," Martinez announced. "A few more pushes." With Ethan's hand gripping hers, Sophia found strength she didn't know she had. At 6:47 a.m., Faith Victoria Carter entered the world with a powerful cry that made both parents burst into tears. "She's perfect," Ethan sobbed, staring at the tiny baby. "Sophia, she's absolutely perfect." "Is she okay?" Sophia asked breathlessly. "She's beautiful and healthy, Doctor," Martinez said, placing Faith on Sophia's chest briefly. But Joy Ruby was ready to make her entrance. "Here comes baby number 2, Doctor," Martinez announced. 3 minutes later, Joy Ruby Carter arrived quietly, her dark eyes wide and alert. "And there's our little observer." Ethan laughed through his tears. "She's already taking everything in." 2 girls, Sophia whispered in wonder, touching Joy's tiny fingers. "Ethan, we have 2 daughters." "We have 2 daughters," he confirmed, kissing first Sophia, then Joy's forehead, Faith Victoria, and Joy Ruby Carter. The medical team worked while Ethan cut umbilical cords with shaking hands and took countless photos. "Would you like to hold one of your daughters?" a nurse asked. Ethan's face went pale. "What if I drop her? They're so small." "You won't drop her," Sophia said softly. "Ethan, hold your daughter." The nurse placed Faith in Ethan's arms. The moment his daughter settled against his chest, Ethan's face transformed with wonder. "Hi, Faith," he whispered. "I'm your daddy. I've been waiting to meet you." Faith made a small sound, and Ethan nearly lost his composure. "She knows my voice." "Of course she knows you," Sophia said through tears. Soon, Ethan was holding both daughters while Sophia recovered. He looked overwhelmed by the reality of being a father. "I can't believe they're ours," he said in wonder. "You're now the proud parents of 2 healthy baby girls, Dr. Martinez said. Faith weighs 6 pounds, 2 ounces, and Joy weighs 5 pounds, 14 ounces. Within an hour, they were in their recovery room with both babies sleeping peacefully. Ethan hadn't stopped staring at them. "They are so tiny," he marveled. "How are they so perfect?" "They're perfect because they're ours," Sophia said softly. A soft knock interrupted them, and Nana Ruby appeared with tears in her eyes. "Can I meet my great-granddaughters?" she asked softly. Grandparents visited throughout the day, each more emotional than the last. Nana Ruby held each baby with tears streaming down her face. "Hello, my sweet girls," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." "They look like Sophia," Ethan's mother observed. "They have Ethan's chin," Nana Ruby disagreed. As evening came, Ethan pulled a chair close to Sophia's bed. Faith and Joy slept peacefully, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm. "Do you think they know they're twins?" Sophia asked softly. "I think they know they're loved and safe," Ethan replied. "We're parents," Sophia said wonderingly. The best parents these girls could have asked for, Ethan said firmly. Joy opened her eyes and looked directly at Ethan with such intensity that his breath caught. Hi, little girl, he whispered, stroking her cheek. Were you listening? Joy made a small sound, and Faith stirred in response. They're going to be best friends, Sophia predicted. Best friends, sisters, and partners in everything, Ethan agreed. Later that night, Ethan stood by the window, looking out at Chicago's skyline. Everything had come full circle. The spilled coffee that led to love, the challenges that proved their strength, and now these two perfect girls. Thank you, he whispered. Behind him, Sophia stirred and smiled at him. What are you thinking about? She asked quietly. How it all led to this moment, Ethan replied. No regrets? Sophia asked. Not a single one, Ethan said firmly. I love you, Ethan Carter, Sophia said softly. I love you too, Sophia Carter, he replied, kissing her forehead. As dawn broke over Chicago, the Carter family slept peacefully together. Faith and Joy Carter were surrounded by more love than many people experienced in a lifetime. Ethan and Sophia's love story had begun with a chance encounter and a spilled latte. It had grown through shared dreams, weathered separation, and blossomed into forever. Now it had created something beautiful and lasting. The legacy of love they would pass down through generations. Faith and Joy were simply two perfect babies, love beyond measure, beginning their own beautiful story in the arms of parents who had found their forever in each other.